Clarisse Del Mundo thought she had finally found the love she waited 40 years for, until the man she trusted turned her life into a deadly trap of lies and revenge. Ramon Estrellado appeared to be the perfect partner, but behind his charm was a predator building a scam so dark it would push Clarisse into a fight for her life. Amina Dalverde knew the truth long before Clarisse did, and her warning would expose a web of deception far deadlier than anyone expected. Clarisse Del Mundo watched her sister fall deeply in love, never imagining the man behind the screen would ignite a chain of events leading to betrayal and vengeance. Clarisse Del Mundo survived heartbreak, manipulation, and fear, but nothing prepared her for the moment she realized Ramon wasn't finished with her yet. Clarisse Del Mundo lived a quiet and routine life in the heart of Quezon City. Every morning she walked the same path to the accounting firm where she had worked for nearly a decade. Her coworkers admired her dedication, but most never truly understood the loneliness she carried behind her warm smile. At 40 years old, Clarisse often felt caught between expectations and reality. Many of her friends were married with children, while she remained single, building a stable but solitary existence. She longed for companionship, not out of desperation, but out of a deep desire to share her life with someone who valued her sincerity. On her evenings alone, Clarisse explored online groups meant for Filipinos living or working abroad. She enjoyed reading their experiences and imagining the adventures they described. One day, she noticed a post from a man named Ramon Estrellado. He claimed to be an overseas worker who had built a successful life through determination and faith. His profile showed images of luxurious trips, upscale restaurants, and expensive watches. Clarisse initially scrolled past his posts, believing his lifestyle was far from anything she could relate to. But something about the way he wrote caught her attention. He seemed approachable, confident, and thoughtful. Over time, Clarisse began responding to some of his posts. He replied frequently, always leaving comments filled with encouragement. Her days started to include brief moments of excitement whenever she saw his name appear on her screen. She felt a growing connection and started to imagine that perhaps this man could offer the companionship she had been searching for. Ramon showed interest in her life, asking questions that made her feel seen. Clarisse began to trust him, believing his gestures were genuine and heartfelt. Weeks turned into months, and their bond deepened. Clarisse felt a kind of happiness she had not experienced in years. Even simple notifications made her anxious with anticipation. She found herself rearranging her schedule just to be available when he usually came online. Her friends noticed the change in her mood. She smiled more, dressed with more care, and carried a hopeful glow she never had before. They assumed she had met someone special, but Clarisse remained cautious, wanting to protect the fragile happiness she had discovered. As time passed, Ramon shared more details about his life abroad. He described long hours at work and dreams of returning to the Philippines to settle down. Clarisse listened attentively, forming a mental image of a hard-working man who wanted stability as much as she did. She admired his ambition and the way he expressed concern for her well-being. The possibility of meeting him in person felt both thrilling and frightening. She wondered whether she was worthy of someone so polished and successful. One evening, Ramon mentioned that he hopes to come home soon. Clarisse's heart fluttered with anticipation. She imagined that his return would finally align her life with the future she dreamed of. She began picturing a home filled with laughter and companionship, dinners shared after work, and simple mornings spent together. She allowed herself to imagine a wedding, even though no such conversation had taken place. Clarisse did not realize that Ramon had carefully observed her reactions over time. He had identified her hopes, mapped her fears, and studied the kind of affection she longed for. He recognized her vulnerability and saw an opportunity to use it. His attention was calculated, each step designed to pull her deeper into trust. But Clarisse, blinded by the warmth he brought into her life, could not see the shadow behind his charming persona. She continued believing their story was the beginning of something beautiful. Instead, it was the first chapter of a dangerous path that would lead her into a heartbreak more devastating than anything she could have imagined. Ramon Estrellado finally returned to the Philippines in the middle of the rainy season. Clarisse Del Mundo felt her heart race as she prepared to meet him for the first time. She spent extra time choosing her clothes, practicing calm breaths, and reminding herself that she deserved happiness. When she saw him waiting outside a cafe in Makati, she almost could not believe how effortlessly his online photos matched his real presence. He carried himself with confidence, appearing polished, charming, and attentive. Clarisse felt an immediate rush of relief. The man she had invested months of trust into was not a fantasy after all. Ramon greeted her with warmth, and Clarisse's nerves faded. He acted like someone who had known her for years, guiding their meeting with a sense of ease that made her feel safe. During the following weeks, they spent time exploring restaurants, parks, and shopping centers. Ramon showcased a lifestyle that dazzled Clarisse: high-end boutiques, expensive watches, and casual mentions of business deals. She admired him deeply, believing she had been blessed with a partner who valued her sincerity and loyalty. The more she learned about him, the more she imagined a shared future. As their relationship continued, Ramon began introducing subtle stories about financial burdens. First, he mentioned delayed payments from his overseas job. Then he spoke of a business investment that was temporarily stuck. Clarisse felt concern for him, but Ramon always brushed it off, presenting the difficulties as minor setbacks. She wanted to help, but also feared appearing intrusive. However, Ramon knew exactly how to plant seeds of worry while pretending to be strong. Clarisse admired his resilience and saw his challenges as proof of his dedication to building a better life. Soon, Ramon introduced the idea of marriage. The word alone caused Clarisse's heart to swell. She had waited years for someone to see her as a lifelong partner, and the possibility felt like a long-closed door finally opening. Ramon spoke of shared goals and a stable future. Clarisse allowed herself to dream of a home filled with partnership rather than silence. She felt honored that he chose her, believing she had finally found the love she longed for. But just as quickly as the dream formed, its cracks began to show. Ramon mentioned a need for financial support to finalize documents for their supposed wedding. He framed it as a temporary help, something he would repay once his overseas funds cleared. Clarisse hesitated. She knew the danger of mixing love with financial dependency. Yet the fear of losing him overshadowed her caution. She convinced herself she was supporting her future, not enabling a risk. She loaned him a portion of her savings, believing it would strengthen their bond. Ramon expressed gratitude, and this reassurance made Clarisse feel secure again. But soon after, he asked for more. He described unforeseen delays, missing transfers, and business complications. His requests grew in size, and Clarisse felt her savings thinning. Part of her sensed something was off, but she held on to the affectionate image of the man who made her feel cherished. She justified each decision as a sacrifice for love. The emotional pressure intensified when Ramon introduced the notion of finalizing their engagement quickly. Clarisse felt flattered, interpreting the urgency as commitment. She confided in a few friends, but when they expressed concern, she dismissed it. She believed they simply did not understand the strength of their bond. Ramon's influence had woven itself too deeply into her thoughts for her to step back.
Clarisse also noticed subtle changes in his behavior. Ramon grew less patient, more demanding. When she questioned details about his finances, he shifted the topic, often making her feel guilty for doubting him. She began to experience anxiety, though she hid it behind her smiles. Ramon seemed to sense her unease and compensated with sudden acts of affection, ensuring she stayed emotionally dependent. As weeks passed, Clarisse unknowingly drifted into a dangerous trap. Each decision she made, each peso she lent, each moment of trust she offered brought her one step closer to a betrayal that would shatter not only her finances, but her faith in love itself. What started as hope was slowly transforming into a situation she could no longer control. And Ramon, with his flawless charm and calculated manipulation, was preparing for the next phase of his plan.
Clarisse Del Mundo woke one morning with an unsettling feeling she could not explain. The excitement that once filled her heart had been replaced by a dull heaviness. Ramon Estrellado's messages, once constant and filled with affection, had become irregular. He offered brief explanations, always blaming overseas work issues or unreliable connections. Clarisse tried to believe him, but the silence between them began stretching longer than she was comfortable with. She noticed a pattern. His messages grew warm whenever he needed something, then faded once she provided it. Still, she clung to hope, convincing herself that stress was simply changing his demeanor. One afternoon, Clarisse attempted to call Ramon, but he declined the call twice. Hours later, she received a vague message claiming he was busy handling a business emergency. The evasiveness unsettled her, but she responded with understanding. She wanted him to know she was supportive. Yet, even as she typed, she felt as if she were speaking into a void. Over time, Ramon's requests for money became more urgent. He insisted he needed funds to cover expensive documents connected to their future plans. He described each situation so convincingly that Clarisse feared saying no. She told herself she was investing in the life they were building together, even as her bank balance continued slipping lower. Her coworkers began to notice changes in her mood. Clarisse, once organized and punctual, seemed distracted. She stayed late to finish tasks she usually completed with ease. She avoided conversations that might lead to questions about her personal life. She feared judgment and wanted to protect the image she had built in her mind. Despite her growing unease, she held on to the belief that Ramon still cared for her. She did not want to imagine the possibility of deception. Everything changed when Clarisse attempted to surprise Ramon by visiting the address he once mentioned in passing. She wanted to bring him a meal and offer comfort during what he claimed was a stressful time. But when she reached the location, the building guard informed her that no one by Ramon's name lived there. Confused, she double-checked the unit number. Still, the guard insisted she had the wrong person. Clarisse felt her heartbeat spike in a mix of fear and embarrassment. She thanked the guard and left quietly, her thoughts spiraling. That evening, Clarisse confronted Ramon through text. She kept her tone gentle, hoping to avoid conflict while seeking clarity. However, the moment she mentioned the visit, Ramon vanished online. Hours passed, then a full day. Clarisse felt panic building inside her. She checked his social media accounts and noticed subtle signs she had never paid attention to before. Several photos appeared staged, with backgrounds that looked borrowed from foreign blogs. His posts about traveling seemed vague. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through everything she once admired. Slowly, the illusion she had believed in began to crumble. 2 days later, Ramon reappeared with a long message filled with excuses. He insisted he had used a temporary address while renovating another unit. Clarisse wanted to accept this explanation, but doubt had taken deep root. For the first time, she questioned everything she thought she knew about him.
She replayed past conversations in her mind, noticing details she had once overlooked. His stories had inconsistencies she had ignored. His image of success suddenly seemed like a carefully arranged performance. Still, Ramon sensed her hesitation and shifted his tone. He expressed sudden urgency about continuing their wedding plans. He claimed he needed Clarisse's trust now more than ever. Clarisse felt torn between fear and affection. She wanted to believe that love could withstand uncertainty, but she also feared being manipulated. The emotional conflict left her drained and restless. The situation worsened when she received a message from an unfamiliar woman named Amina Dalverde. The message was brief, asking Clarisse if she knew Ramon well. Confused, she responded cautiously. What Amina revealed next shattered the last remnants of Clarisse's innocence. She claimed to be another woman Ramon had courted online. She hinted at lies, financial manipulation, and a history of targeting vulnerable women. She offered to share proof if Clarisse was willing to hear it. She felt her stomach tighten as dread washed over her. She knew she needed to face the truth she had been avoiding. The story she thought she was living, a story filled with hope, companionship, and a future, was beginning to unravel. And the pieces falling apart revealed something far darker than she ever imagined.
Clarisse Del Mundo stared at her phone long after her conversation with Amina Dalverde ended. Her hands trembled as she absorbed the weight of everything she had learned. Amina had sent screenshots of messages Ramon Estrellado had used on her, messages nearly identical to the ones he had sent Clarisse. The same compliments, the same promises of a future, the same sudden financial emergencies. Each piece of evidence felt like a blade cutting deeper into Clarisse's trust. She sat frozen for hours, replaying every moment she had believed was genuine. The more she remembered, the clearer the pattern became. Ramon had never loved her. He had studied her loneliness, fed her hope, and manipulated her until she was trapped. Clarisse knew she needed to confront the truth more directly. Her remaining savings had vanished into Ramon's hands, but money was no longer the only thing she had lost. Her dignity, her peace, and her sense of safety had been torn apart. She found the courage to contact Amina again, and this time Amina connected her with two other women who shared similar experiences. All of them had fallen for Ramon's charm, all had been promised love, and all had been pressured into giving money. Clarisse realized she was not special in his eyes. She was merely the next name on his list. The betrayal ignited something inside her. The sadness that had consumed her turned into anger. She no longer wanted to cry. She wanted justice. She gathered every message, receipt, and screenshot she could find. She organized them methodically, wanting to ensure there was no loose thread in her case. Still, Clarisse hesitated before reporting him. A quiet fear lingered. What if he blamed her? What if he found her? She knew Ramon was capable of more manipulation than she had ever imagined, but she also knew she could not remain silent. Before she went to the authorities, Clarisse attempted one final test. She sent Ramon a message pretending she wanted to work things out and was willing to meet him in person. She waited anxiously for his reply, unsure if he would respond at all now that her finances were nearly depleted. Hours later, he answered, acting concerned and affectionate as if nothing had happened. The familiar tone that once made her heart swell now made her feel sick. She realized how carefully he shifted his behavior to fit whatever he needed from her. Ramon suggested they meet in a private place to talk. This only confirmed Clarisse's suspicions. She sensed danger in his insistence. She canceled the meeting and instead forwarded their entire message history to the cybercrime division. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of control. The officers she met listened closely, nodding as she described how everything began. They informed her that Ramon was already a person of interest in multiple online scam cases. Her evidence could help strengthen the case against him. But even as Clarisse pursued lawful justice, another idea began forming in the back of her mind, something darker and far more personal. She wanted Ramon to feel the fear she had felt. She wanted him to understand the devastation he caused.
She wanted him to face consequences beyond illegal paperwork and warnings. The anger inside her grew, fed by every humiliation she had endured. She found herself fantasizing about confronting him, not with tears, but with power. But before she could decide what path to take, Ramon made the first move. Late one night, Clarisse received a threatening message from an unknown number. The sender accused her of spreading lies about him. The tone was sharp, intimidating, and unmistakably Ramon's. Her heart pounded as she realized he had discovered her intentions. He warned her to stop immediately or face consequences. Clarisse felt a chill run down her spine. She looked around her dim apartment, suddenly hyper-aware of every sound outside her windows. Ramon's image, once handsome and reassuring, had transformed into something sinister. Fear ignited urgency. Clarisse reached out to Amina, who expressed similar threats. It became clear that Ramon was trying to silence all of them. Clarisse understood then that this was no longer emotional manipulation. It was becoming dangerous. The man she had once seen as a partner was revealing his true nature, a predator unwilling to lose control. Something hardened in Clarisse that night. The fear inside her fused into determination. She no longer wanted to hide, hesitate, or negotiate. Ramon had crossed a line he could never return from, and Clarisse, once gentle and reserved, was beginning to transform into someone capable of standing her ground. The betrayal that had broken her was now shaping her into a force Ramon never expected.
Clarisse Del Mundo woke before dawn the next morning, her mind clear for the first time in weeks. Her fear had not disappeared, but it had changed shape. It no longer froze her, it fueled her. She realized she could not wait for Ramon Estrellado to make another move. She needed to take control before he destroyed anyone else. The threats he sent the night before confirmed everything she suspected. He operated without conscience, and he believed she was still weak enough to manipulate. Clarisse was determined to prove him wrong. She reached out again to Amina Dalverde and the two other victims. Together they formed a small network of women driven by the same need for justice. They exchanged information, traced old conversations, and pieced together a timeline showing how Ramon targeted each of them with precision. They discovered overlapping dates, identical promises, and repeated lies. Clarisse felt sick reading how he had copied his affection word for word. But instead of breaking her, the information strengthened her resolve. She returned to the cybercrime division with the new evidence. The officers listened carefully, impressed with the depth of documentation the women had gathered. They explained that Ramon's activities extended far beyond romance scams. He was suspected of funneling the money he stole into a larger operation involving fraudulent investments. They warned Clarisse to be cautious, but inside her, caution had evolved into strategic thinking. She asked the officers what would help the investigation most. They suggested evidence of him accepting money again or attempting to meet another victim. Clarisse knew exactly how to make that happen. She created a new online profile under a false name, carefully designed to attract Ramon's attention. It displayed a modest lifestyle, just enough vulnerability to match his usual targets and details he would find appealing. Clarisse felt a strange sense of power as she crafted the persona. For months, Ramon had controlled the narrative. Now she was rewriting the script. Within days, he contacted the profile, delivering the same polished charm he once used on her. Clarisse read his messages coldly, knowing each word was a weapon he believed would work again. This time, however, she was the one sharpening the blade. She played along, responding slowly, cautiously, giving him just enough interest to keep him hooked. Ramon, unaware of her involvement, followed his usual pattern. He expressed admiration, pretended emotional connection, and hinted at financial trouble. The moment he asked for help, Clarisse captured every screenshot and forwarded them to authorities. The officers told her they were close to obtaining a warrant. She felt a spark of satisfaction. Ramon was finally slipping out of his own control. But while she played her part online, Clarisse could not ignore the growing sense of danger around her. She noticed unfamiliar faces near her workplace and strange phone calls where no one spoke. Each time her heart pounded, but she refused to retreat.
She confided in her sister, Clarisse Del Mundo, who insisted she sleep at her house until the situation settled. Clarisse agreed, realizing she could no longer underestimate Ramon's desperation. One night, while staying with Maritza, Clarisse received a call from the investigators. They informed her that Ramon had attempted to flee the city. Acting quickly, authorities intercepted him at a bus terminal using the evidence Clarisse and the other women had gathered. Hearing the news, Clarisse felt a wave of relief unlike anything she had experienced before. The man who once controlled her emotions with calculated gentleness was now behind bars, stripped of the power he had abused for so long. When Clarisse visited the station to identify him formally, she saw Ramon sitting behind a glass panel. His eyes were cold, full of the same arrogance she once mistook for confidence. But something in him changed when he realized she was the one who had brought him down. She watched him carefully, noticing the flicker of panic he tried to hide. For the first time, she saw not a charming suitor or a dangerous predator. She saw a man cornered by the consequences of his own actions. Clarisse walked away from the station with a steady breath. The journey had cost her savings, trust, and emotional peace, but she had reclaimed something far more important: her strength. She knew her healing would not happen overnight. The scars would remain, reminders of the price she paid for believing in a man who preyed on hope. But she also knew she was not the same woman he targeted months ago. Her story spread quietly at first, then more widely as more victims came forward. The case became part of a larger investigation into romance scams, helping protect others from falling into similar traps. Clarisse felt proud knowing her darkest experience had transformed into something that exposed a criminal network. In the end, she did not seek revenge through violence or fear. Her revenge came in the form of truth, courage, and the strength to dismantle the illusion he had built so carefully.
Clarisse Del Mundo slowly returned to her normal routines, though nothing about her life felt normal anymore. The aftermath of Ramon Estrellado's arrest created a strange quiet that both comforted and unsettled her. For months, she had lived in constant fear, waiting for his messages, his demands, his threats. Now there were no alerts lighting up her phone, no sudden jolts of panic whenever an unknown number appeared. Instead, there was a silence filled with questions she was still trying to answer. Healing, she learned, was not a straight path. It was a long road made of small, often painful steps. Clarisse resumed work, where her coworkers welcomed her gently. She offered no details, only saying she had gone through something personal. The truth felt too heavy to share casually. She preferred to keep it tucked away, revealing it only when necessary. Her sister Maritza continued checking on her every evening, offering warmth that Clarisse had once overlooked. Slowly, Clarisse realized how much support she had in the people who never asked for anything in return. But the emotional damage ran deep. Some nights she woke suddenly, her heart racing, her mind replaying memories she wished she could erase. She remembered the promises Ramon made, the lies he used to bind her heart to his, and the humiliation she felt when she discovered the truth. Shame sat heavy on her chest, even though she knew she wasn't at fault. She began attending counseling sessions recommended by the investigators. The counselor, experienced in dealing with scam-related trauma, helped her Clarisse understand that manipulation often leaves invisible wounds. She learned how predators studied emotions the way others studied numbers, and how her kindness became a tool used against her. Each session peeled away a layer of confusion, replacing it with clarity and acceptance. Meanwhile, the case against Ramon gained momentum. More victims came forward after hearing Clarisse's involvement. Women from different parts of the country, some young, some middle-aged, shared stories nearly identical to hers. Their experiences painted a chilling picture of a man who had perfected the art of emotional exploitation.
Authorities expanded the investigation, uncovering financial documents, fake identities, and hidden transactions tied to a larger criminal group. Clarisse was asked to testify as a primary witness. The thought terrified her, but she knew her voice carried weight now. She wanted justice not just for herself, but for all the women who had been silenced by shame. As the court proceedings unfolded, Clarisse found strength she never knew she had. She looked at Ramon from across the courtroom, no longer seeing the illusion she once fell for. His charm had evaporated, replaced by the exposed truth of who he really was. Each time she spoke, she felt the grip of his manipulation weakening. By telling her story openly and honestly, she reclaimed the pieces of herself he had taken. The media began covering the case, not naming victims, but discussing the growing problem of romance scams in the country. Clarisse listened, understanding that her experience was part of a much bigger issue. She felt compelled to help others avoid the pain she endured. With encouragement from her counselor and support group, she started volunteering at online safety seminars, sharing insights on recognizing digital manipulation. Her calm, sincere manner resonated with audiences. She wasn't a professional speaker, but her story carried weight because it was real. Months later, when the judge delivered a long sentence for Ramon's crimes, Clarisse felt a wave of relief she had been craving. It wasn't triumph. It was closure. For the first time since meeting him, she breathed without fear. She knew justice would never fully erase the emotional scars, but it allowed her to step forward without his shadow trailing behind her. After the case concluded, Clarisse took a quiet trip to a beach in La Union. She sat by the shore, the early morning sun warming her face, and listened to the waves wash over the sand. She thought about everything she had endured: hope, betrayal, fear, and finally strength. She realized that despite the darkness she walked through, she had not been defeated. She had rebuilt herself piece by piece, guided by courage she once believed she lacked. As the tide rolled in, Clarisse whispered a promise to herself she would live without fear, trust carefully but not fearfully, and continue helping others see what she once could not. Her story, once shaped by deception, now became a symbol of resilience. And slowly, with each passing day, Clarisse stepped into a future no longer defined by the man who tried to break her, but the woman she had become.